Welcome, everyone. This is a special presentation brought to you by the people over at Lean Frontiers and the host of the Lean People Development Summit, where they will be developing lean leaders at all levels of the organization. The summit is September 11th and 12th, 2017 in Savannah, Georgia. You can find out more at leanpeopledevelopment.com. Enjoy the podcast. With me today is Daniel T. Jones. Dan Jones was part of the original MIT research team that discovered and codified the system Toyota used to make automobiles and named it Lean. He is the co-author of classic groundbreaking works, The Machine That Changed the World, Lean Thinking, and one of my favorites, and definitely worn out, is Lean Solutions. Okay,
Okay, great.
Dan is also the co-founder and chairman of the nonprofit Lean Enterprise Institute in the U.S., the Lean Enterprise Academy in the U.K., and the Lean Global Network of Institutes. In addition, he has added one more book to the previous mention, The Lean Leadership Strategy. Dan, honored once again, and thanks for being here.
I'm very, very pleased to be here, Joe. Yeah, let me just say that one thing, I've actually freed myself of all of those responsibilities so that I have time now to digest all the lessons we've learned and to write, and that's the product.
Well, I must ask you, I asked why the book now? I mean, you have not written, for a while.
That's right. Well, it's a combination of circumstances. We were frustrated at the progress of Lean, particularly consultant-led projects that were being done for arm's-length leaders who were not involved. And we've been involved in lots of those and observed lots of those, and they run into the sand after 3 or 4 years. And so we were trying to find an answer to why that was the case and what we would have to do. We began working with a bunch of CEOs who had all been through that same experience of consultant-led programs that hadn't really worked, and had convinced themselves that they needed to lead it themselves. And so it was really working with those CEOs and digesting and distilling the changes in thought process that they'd gone through to learn how to actually lead a lean transformation themselves very actively, that gave us the starting point for this book. And bringing together a group of CEOs, and one of the CEOs joined us as an author because he's Jacques Chaise, who's an expert in learning and founded the French chapter of the Society for Organizational Learning. So he was very, very interested in learning. Michael Ballet, who's been also interested in learning for a very long time, and I've worked with Michael and his father for years and years and years. And Adori Fiume, who was the finance director of Wymold. We thought we needed some business grounding if we were going to address leaders. So we tried to answer the question, what does a leader need to do to really grasp the fact that Lean is actually a strategy, something that Art Berners said for years and years, and we've all sort of nodded and say, yeah, but actually what does it mean? And so this book is trying to answer that question. What does a leader, how do they need to learn to think about strategy? How do they need to learn to think about building learning in the organization? And how to take that learning and turn it onto the bottom line. And so those are the questions that we started grappling with about 3-4 years ago. And then gradually we started writing articles together, and they've come together in a book that Michael's edited called Leading with Lean. And that's the intellectual basis of our journey. But we've had a lot of fun putting this Lean strategy book together. I didn't expect to be writing this book at this point in time in my history, but Michael's pretty persuasive, and actually, frankly, this has been a really exciting journey where we've learned a ton from each other. So the book has really emerged out of a dialogue between the four of us. That's really fantastic.
I would object to something with you right away, okay?
Yeah.
You talked about leaders and CEOs and things, but the Lean Leadership Strategy is written that I really think anyone in a lean enterprise can benefit from reading the book. I think it's hardly exclusive to senior management.
No, I totally agree. In fact, what Toyota's trying to do and what we're trying to do in Lean is turn everybody into a leader at every level in the organization. And so while you can do Lean at the bottom and you can create lots of leaders at the bottom of the organization, unless the leaders at the top are involved, and we know this from experience many, many times, unless the leaders at the top are involved, then it's not going to last. And so that's why we particularly focused on the role of the leader at the top, because that's who we want to capture. And understanding that this message trickles down for leaders wherever they find themselves in the organization. So actually, team leader, group leader, plant manager, divisional vice president, they're all leaders. Yeah, so this is a generic message, you're right. But it's the top-down piece of the bottom-up experience that we all have had with Lean to date.
The practicality of what you're saying encompasses your whole organization, but it's also maybe some of that missing part of that Lean leadership strategy is that they have to be sort of practical leaders. Is there any truth to that?
No, absolutely. They have to, absolutely. But look, I mean, leaders have been taught in business schools that their job is to worry about strategy. All right. And watch the videos of Michael Porter. He says strategy and execution are completely separate. Strategy is all about positioning in the marketplace against your competitors, etc. But execution is all about buying best practice. Whereas you buy it from the experts, you buy it from the low-cost location, you buy best practice. And execution is all about how smart you are at buying best practice. And that tells leaders their job's not to get involved in operations. They get other people to do that. And so it separates leaders. They've been taught not to get involved in operations, at least not to get hands-on involved in operations, and to leave solving their problems to experts that they hire. So you get an expert to design a system, you get an expert to design a better process or in a new location. And middle management's jobs is to force compliance by the employees you then hire with the expert design system. So there's very little learning, and there's very little capability development, which of course is the foundation of what Toyota's approach, which is actually engaging everyone, not just the experts, in learning how to solve their day-to-day problems in order to learn how to solve tomorrow's problems and the day after tomorrow's problems using a common scientific approach.
Talking about Lean strategy then, and the most widely known strategy model you brought up is Michael Porter's.
Absolutely.
All right.
And look, I think Michael Porter articulated the management system that was completely appropriate for the age of mass production, with a standard product, where economies of scale were key, where cost cutting was rife, where it's a people-free process. You don't know who's going to work in this process, so you design it so any idiot can do it, with a bit of training, and you engage middle management to force compliance. And that leads to highly and disengaged employees, and it leads to very static focus on static optimization rather than developing growing capabilities from the continuous improvement we know is so effective with Lean.
What makes the Lean strategy different than Porter's?
Oh, it's fundamentally different. I mean, Porter's essentially looking at the position of the organization in the marketplace. And I'm not saying Lean don't take any notice of that. But Porter's vision doesn't look inside Lean for the sources of competitive growth. It's essentially about acquiring best practice assets and resources. Whereas Lean is about focusing on the customer, absolutely, creating customer value, additional value for customers, engaging everybody in understanding the work much more deeply, understanding how they can, through doing the work more accurately, can link that and create flow, how you build teams that solve problems together, and how you create the management system to support and encourage that learning on the shop floor. So it's a very fundamentally different set of objectives to create dynamic economies through engaging everyone in solving problems, rather than static optimization through hiring experts.
I think in the book, in fact, you basically end the book with the comparison, okay, between Porter's strategy and Toyota's. Those differences, it seems to be a model of engagement, how to engage surrounding people, employees and everybody together.
Right. Well, I think so. It looks to build dynamic economies through engaging everybody at every level in continually learning how to do their own work better and in learning how to work together more effectively with colleagues to create customer value. The major focus of leaders needs to be to actually go and find the underlying problems that the organization actually needs to solve to improve its ability to create value for customers. And you can't find those problems unless you actually go to the front line and observe how the front line struggles day to day with the day-to-day problems. And as you support people at the front line, you begin to see, there's an underlying issue here or policy, often which senior management is responsible for creating, that is actually creating all of these obstacles to doing the work the right way. So one half of this is actually about learning how to improve today's processes, but the really big benefit is when you actually feed those improvements back into the design of the next generation product and process. And you create completely new opportunities out of that for serving customers and for creating new products and services.
Well, one of the things, the big term today, okay, is agile, right? Okay,
right.
Everybody's agile.
Yeah.
And one of the things they talk about is complexity, and that lean can't survive and prosper within complexity. But to me, it sounds like the teamwork that we describe and the cross-functional teams is things that have been part of lean from day one. And your description
Absolutely.
of just in time was a fantastic description of that process.
Well, I've been listening to all of the founders of the software development movement, Agile and so on, one by one in the Paris Lean IT conferences, and it strikes me that all of them have actually developed their inspiration for Agile, for Scrum, for DevOps, for extreme processing and so on, extreme programming. All of that, they've been inspired by Lean, by Toyota, and by the idea of engaging people in improving their processes and their work. So a lot of the Agile movement is absolutely congruent with Lean. And indeed, Lean is a way of creating an organization that itself is agile, if you like, is an organization that can learn and adapt to changing circumstances and can tailor products and services much more closely to individual different types of customers, and can also cope with the introduction of new technologies much faster. I mean, the big advantage of a continuous improvement in both product and service development is that you can feed forward the lessons much faster in a series of experiments, a more rapid series of experiments that creates new products and creates new services. So cumulative iteration is actually the foundation for the scaling up of a new idea through repeated experiments. So it's taking the continuous improvement idea into the customer relationship with the product development folks that actually turns product development from a project-based activity into a continual stream of creating new products. And that is exactly the world that the Agile folks come out of. Agile and Lean actually are going to come together. It's just that we don't use the same language. We come from different places, but there's a huge amount of overlap. And on the Agile side, I would say there's still a fairly shallow understanding of the deeper aspects of Lean management system, and we're trying to explain some of those in this book. to them as well.
Yeah, and I think you hit that very well in the book, and I thought you did that. And I always thought that Agile attached lean to its name, okay, to create sustainability. Because without it, I don't know that it's sustainable. And that may be
Right.
me being a lean guy, okay, saying that. But I have that conversation fairly often.
I'm sure you do. Yeah, and look, there are lean folks who resist the agile world and or even the lean startup world. I'm of the opposite persuasion. I think we're all drawing from the same sources and we're interpreting them from different perspectives. And gradually, as we get an integration of software and hardware and knowledge work and physical work, as is happening in every industry, we have to find a common language to manage things together and manage things together with a workforce that is actually vastly more skilled and knowledgeable than the workforces we've had in the past. So they're not going to be treated in a traditional system designed by others that people just are expected to comply with. So I think, lean in many ways, plus the agile, plus the entrepreneurship of a startup, plus design thinking and so on, is actually the basis of a people-centric management system for our time. I think Toyota was pointing the way many years ago, and our job is now to articulate the people-centric management system that our time needs.
I go back to that complexity thing about Agile a little bit, is that the knowledge work, and we can't, lean is for production. And I argue that, and I smile so much because I don't think anybody's been in a car factory if they think it's,
exactly. Exactly. And I mean, the software guys have hidden behind this complexity nonsense for so long. When you start challenging them, what are all those tickets coming, resulting from your introduction of your products? That's all muda, that's all waste, that's all should have been designed out in the first place. And they say, well, but that's not software. And I say, hey, that is the world of software. And that is a world that means you need a very different approach to the architecture of software, to break it down into small pieces and to experiment with continually improving those pieces. So continuous improvement is actually a foundation of the approach to software developed by the Amazons and the Googles of this world, where they're releasing changes by the day instead of, once every 6 months to the SAP system. So, the differences are nothing like as great as we experience. I mean, you heard the same thing from the healthcare folks many years ago. They said healthcare is so different because every patient's different and it's not a factory. And well, no, it's not a factory, but an awful lot of the things that apply in a factory also apply in a hospital. And the same with software. So I've seen all these excuses before, and they don't wash. And increasingly, we need to blow up. I think we need to blow up the IT departments and put all the software guys right next to the customers, rather than have them design systems at a distance, which don't work.
Well, I have to say, the SHRM conference last year, an or last week, last week, talked about that 47% of senior executives feel that their employees are burnt out over change.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And I thought that's because they don't have a lean strategy in place. That's what I thought.
Absolutely. Absolutely right. I mean, that is the logical consequence. That's one of the logical consequences of the traditional management, which hires hands rather than brains, because the brains, it buys brains from a few experts. But the more widespread manifestation of that is you can see in the political field, where people are feeling not only nobody cares politically, but also my manager doesn't care, and I don't care about my job either. So that the level of dissatisfaction, I think, is alarmingly high and actually not sustainable.
I want to touch on one more thing about the book, and that's the collaboration thing that you've discussed a lot with partners and employees, and building those, and building that productivity that way. And one of the things is that I look at some of the things that I've read, and it seems that we haven't done a good enough job to make coaches out of our managers versus
Hmm.
trying to hire that expertise that you alluded to, that coach to come in. Does the book touch upon that? Does it touch about how that management structure should kind of look through people development?
Well, it does in the sense that it introduces, it says one of the consequences of following a lean strategy is that actually there's a different thought process, a different decision-making model behind the process of finding the problems. So we know about problem solving once we've defined what the problems are. We got PDCA and we got A3 and all of that. So organizations are well structured there, but we're saying there's actually a prior process that leaders go through, which is actually finding the problems, finding the underlying problems, then framing those problems as improvement directions, not as a plan, as an improvement directions, and then designing a whole series of experiments with people to see how they can contribute to improve those improvement directions, and then through repeated experiments, finding solutions, forming solutions that last for that organization. So we've come up with a different or an additional decision-making model that actually creates a framework for this dialogue between the mentor and the mentee at every level in the organization. And it's following the progress of the strategy discussions in the military, which no longer think that traditional jumping to a solution or the opinion of the highest paid executive in the room and then developing a plan and forcing that plan through. The military know that doesn't survive contact with the enemy. And so they are talking about creating the front line that can cope in the right way with unforeseen circumstances. And so they call it leading from the ground, or they call it war from the ground up. We call this leading from the ground up, because you cannot find the key problems, strategic problems in the organization unless you can see them, which means a metrics that actually can see problems and the improvements that result from the actions, and also make sure that the organization focuses on the right things. And you can only do that at the Gemba. And so the leaders have to actually find the problems at the Gemba by helping others learn. And that's something we've observed time and time again. And it was a surprise to us. And we thought a lot about how we could articulate that. And that decision-making structure that we outlined at the beginning of the book is fundamental, I think, to understanding what lean leadership is all about.
Oh, I think so. And I have to tell you a story that Michael Bally told me probably 4 years ago.
Okay.
He said when you first get into lean, you typically are introduced it through the tools. Then you go a little farther in lean and you talk about culture, and you do that. And I think that's what we've done the 10 years. And then when you finally understand lean, you see lean as a culture and the tools you do it. And I think your book nailed the kind of that final outlook on lean, and hopefully it opened up the next mountain, maybe. Okay.
Well, we've had a lot of discussions over the years about the difference between a Western approach to imposing solutions to an Eastern approach, Eastern philosophical approach, which is gradually working to improve what you've got, and learning how through deeper study and deeper practice you make the next step and the next step and the next step in a direction towards that mountain. So this very much does reflect the different deeper philosophical thought processes that come from an Eastern perspective. Absolutely, no question about that.
Yeah.
And we've talked about that for a very long time, but it hasn't directly informed what we've done. What we've really done is we've been frustrated by the fact that when we've seen people talk about a lean management system, and you put daily management in, you put problem solving in, you put a Hoshin in, people still focus on those management tools rather than on the thought process and practice that makes those come alive. And so core to us, to understanding that, is understanding that it's all about learning. So leadership is all about creating an environment where people can learn and grow. So it's not an easy environment, as Michael's discussed in Leading with Respect, it's a challenging environment, but one that respects the human being and gives the human being the opportunity to grow and develop. And that alone is a tremendous source of comparative advantage. And once mobilized in an organization, it's unbeatable.
I think so. And Dan, I appreciate your time very much. I could go on and on with you, okay, because I'm always so interested in what you have to say. Is there something that you would like to mention that maybe I did not?
I think cause us to reframe the discussion about lean. And that would be an achievement, because I think lean has got stuck in the consultant, do it to people mindset that actually is very limiting. So I'm hoping that this book will change the language of lean and will deepen our understanding of lean and open up the opportunity for this, as I said, the people-centric management system of the future to emerge. So there are still pieces to add to the lean story. We haven't yet finished. I don't know whether we'll write another book on this. I'm sure Michael Bailey will, because he's a lot younger than me. But this is a management system that has to come in the next 10, 15 years.
Great book. I think it's going to be a companion for me for a very long time. So I appreciate the effort you actually put into it, Dan.
Well, we really learned a tremendous amount in doing it. So it's been a privilege to work with those guys.
Well,
so great to talk to you.
Okay, well, I'd like to thank you again, Dan. I want to thank all the listeners for listening.